We call it
Expedition Truth.
and we know you're gonna love it. You ready now?
Somewhere, among the many competing voices in the world, truth is just waiting to be discovered. So sit back, open your mind to a world beyond your imagination. A world where truth never fears questions. Welcome to Expedition Truth with your host, Jack Ashcraft.
Welcome to the program. We have I think, a fairly interesting expedition for you tonight. Hopefully your week has gone well. Mine is going much better after, the post-COVID time for me. Despite all of the fear and everything surrounding that virus, I have to be honest, it was, the first day was a bit scary. It caused my blood pressure to drop very low, but after that, it was pretty much like just like a flu. And I found out that my neighbor's son had it as well, and another local radio personality, he had it, and so it's apparently going around quite a bit here. So hopefully wherever you are, you've managed to avoid it, and if not, then I pray that you will weather it as well as can be expected. Tonight's topic is a bit different. It's the first time we have had a bit of a debate here on the program. You might remember I had a guest on, TJ Steadman, who was talking about the Nephilim, and he had his own particular viewpoint of the role of Nephilim in history, etc. And my next guest heard that show and took issue with a few things that TJ said. Now, TJ is supposed to be on with us tonight, but apparently there are some connectivity issues with his software at his end. So our producer is still working on that behind the scenes to try to work around that and get him on here. But in the meantime, I want to introduce to you the gentleman who issued the challenge to TJ on some of his ideas. My guest is a longtime researcher and lecturer on issues pertaining to worldview philosophies and various world religions. In that capacity, he's authored a variety of books, articles, and operates his own website. And he's also been published in an apologetics journal, as well as being interviewed for radio and podcast programs. His name is Ken Ammi. Ken, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Great to have you here. Ken, your photograph brings some questions. Are you Jewish by background?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Because you look very, I guess what they would say is stereotypically Jewish.
Yeah.
If we want to venture to use that word,
right, with
the historical issues with that.
Yeah.
But when I saw the picture, I thought, I can see Jesus looking quite similar to that.
Well, the background is, that was taken maybe a decade ago, but a friend of mine said, he's a photographer and he wanted to do a Jesus photo shoot. So I said, well, let's go. Let's get it done right away, because I'm getting to be quite a bit older than Jesus was, and you can't exactly do a photo shoot Jesus the later years, Right. So yeah, that was one of the things that came out of that, was that photograph.
Yeah, we just found out this year that through DNA testing that my wife is of Jewish heritage. Through Spain, actually.
So Sephardic.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, my wife was tested as well, and she is 0.7% Ashkenazi.
Wow. Well,
I'll take it. I said, I'll take it. I didn't marry 100% Shiksa after all.
I didn't. When I took the test, no Jewish DNA showed up. However, when you do my family genealogy, it goes back to Jewish ancestors. So it's way, way, way back there.
Oh, interesting. Yes.
But it was kind of interesting to find out that I married someone of Jewish heritage. It was kind of neat because we didn't expect it. She was born and raised in Mexico, and
well, that does make sense, actually.
Does it?
Right, because a lot of the Sephardic Spaniards came to Central America, then went north through Mexico and even into the southwest of the United States. And a lot of them, to this day, may have some Jew in them and don't even know it, or they realize they have some strange traditions in their families and cultures, and they don't really know why and don't understand them until they figure it out.
Wow.
Where it all came from. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yes.
But yeah, that was kind of interesting to discover that about my wife. Now, our producer tells me that we have TJ on the line. But I want to introduce him to our audience in case they've forgotten. He's not a stranger to the program. As I said, he's appeared before. He lives in Perth, Western Australia. And he has written a book titled Answers to Giant Questions, which explores how understanding the Nephilim will enlarge your faith. TJ, are you there?
Yeah, hello, Jack. Welcome to my backyard garage.
Well, I'm glad we got you on here. Now, you heard my introduction for Ken, correct?
I didn't get the audio, but I am familiar with Ken. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you, Ken.
Likewise, Mr. Steadman. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Okay, guys, this is what I've got going on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give each of you about 10 minutes here, maybe a little less, to make an opening statement, and during which the other person will remain silent or mute his microphone. I want to make it clear we don't want to interrupt each other when we're talking. We're all gentlemen here. So since Ken made the challenge, TJ, I'm going to let him make the first statement, okay?
Okay.
All right, Ken?
If I may, before we begin, I had been told to prepare for 15-minute openings, so if I go a bit over, I hope you'll forgive me.
That's fine. I'm not going to...
Okay, and also, is there a preference as to which Bible version I should be reading?
Nope, you do what you choose.
Okay, great. Just let me know when to start.
Go for it. It's all yours.
Excellent. So I certainly, we're talking about things like challenging each other and such, but I do know that this will be a case of sharpening iron with iron. So two brothers having a discussion, and I'm quite pleased by that. So I've been asked to focus on Numbers chapter 13. So I'm going to invest my opening statement in that chapter, at least the contextually relevant portions of the chapter. So I'll start reading at verse 26. Y anduvieron y vinieron a Moisés y a Aarón y toda la congregación de los hijos de Israel. Okay, you guys got it so far?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page.
Okay. Now, you said you didn't care what version I read, so now you're stuck with it. All right? Okay, fine. Let's try it this way. So the scenario is that 12 spies were sent into the land of Israel, and they are now returning. Okay, so that's where I'm going to pick it up. They brought back word to them and all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, "We went to the land where you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan." Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are able to overcome it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is the land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants," which is rendering the word Nephilim. "The descendants of Anak come from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sights, and so were we in their sight." Okay, so I'm focusing on this one because it is the mother of all Nephilim texts, the mother of all two Nephilim texts that are in the Bible. So note that it's a three-part play, in a manner of speaking. There's the original report that is accepted as is. Then we have some interaction, and then there's a bad report. So just beginning on a commonsensical level, they return from seeing the most awe-inspiring beings on the planet. And they don't run back to camp saying, "OMG, you'll never believe what we saw." Or, I mean, the ancient equivalent of OMG, okay, maybe OM Yud. They don't do that. They go back to camp and they talk about fruit. You know, they talk about the land. They talk about cities. So it's somewhat subjective, but to me, that just doesn't make sense, the order of events. Now, the issue is clearly one of intimidation, right? Because they state the people are strong and the cities are fortified and very large. And the cultural context is that the Israelites at this point are itinerant tent dwellers. But now they're being told that they're going to have to face strong people who live in fortified and large cities. And we know that there's an aspect of fear in this because we're told that Caleb quieted the people. In fact, Deuteronomy 128 states, "Our brethren have discouraged our hearts," when this event is being looked back on. Now, so this is 10 spies on one side and then Caleb on the other one, and we end up finding that Joshua sides with him. So the 10 actually show themselves to be unfaithful and disloyal because they state we're not able to go up against the people, even though later on when it's related, Deuteronomy 1, 29-30, Moses, quote, says to you, "Do not be terrified or afraid of them. The Lord your God goes before you. He will fight for you according to all that he did for you." Now, for some reason, it's often stated that the report that they go on to present is referred to as bad because it is discouraging, except that the discouragement happens before the report. They state we're not able to go up against these people for they're stronger than we. Before we're told, and they gave the children of Israel a bad report. So the report comes after the discouragement. The discouragement is the motivation for the bad report, but the issue is what are the contents of the report? So firstly, these guys are self-contradictory. At first, they state that it's a land that flows with milk and honey. But in the bad report, they state the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. So that's a straight-up contradiction right there. Then they embellish the report, because at first they say the people who dwell in their land are strong, and then again they say they are stronger than we. But then in the bad report, they claim all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. So that is an embellishment. In the original report, they list who they saw: Anakim, Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Canaanites. It's only in the bad report that they decide to add, that they saw the Nephilim as well. Now, with the exception of the Anakim, they're also able to specify where the various people groups live. But when it comes to Nephilim, they're unable to. This is a simple missing data point. They just mention them. They don't mention whereabouts they are. And the content of the bad report, they make 4 unique claims. One, all the people are of great stature. 2, post-flood Nephilim. 3, Anakim are related to Nephilim. 4, Nephilim are very tall. So 1, that they are all of great stature. Well, we know that only some such peoples, specifically the Anakim, are described as being tall. That's it. As to post-flood Nephilim, well, if even part of God's purpose for the flood was to be rid of Nephilim, then any concept of post-flood Nephilim in any way, shape, or form and at any time would imply that God failed. He meant to be rid of them, but he just couldn't get the job done. That Anakim are related to Nephilim, this is a side note, really, just in case for some who claim our Rephaim are related to Nephilim. You can't even get that from the bad report. You could only go as far as claiming that Anakim are related to them, Anakim being a subgroup of Rephaim. And as to Nephilim being tall, well, this is the only description we have of Nephilim physically. Genesis 6 is the only other Nephilim text, and it provides us no physical description of them whatsoever. Now, note that in Deuteronomy 128, it is written, our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying the people are greater and taller than we, and the cities are great and fortified up to heaven. Moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there. So you'll notice there, when this event is being related, there's no mention of Nephilim. It is simply a non-issue. They are just completely gone from the record of this event. And if we consider Branton's translation of the Greek, so the Septuagint, he has the last verse in this chapter as, there we saw giants, and that vague, generic, subjective, and undefined English term is rendering the Greek gigantes. And we were before them as locusts, yea, even so were we before them. So in the Septuagint, there's no mention of Anakim in relation to Nephilim. In other words, from the Septuagint, you're not going to get that Anakim are related to Nephilim. So whether that's a textual issue or what it is, I can only just read what it says. So overall, these unfaithful, disloyal, self-contradictory, embellishing spies who were rebuked for what they said and who actually caused the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness thereafter, they contradict Moses, Caleb, Joshua, God, and the rest of the Bible, because all of them affirm that Anakim et al. Were in the land, but never say a single word about Nephilim. None of them, ever. Not in Joshua's conquering, not in David's wars. And we're told many, many, many times, including as is told to Abraham and Isaac and Moses and many others, of the people of the land and the people who live around the land. And we don't get a single word about Nephilim, ever. We're told of wars and even hand-to-hand battles. Not a single reference to Nephilim ever. We're even told about eschatological issues, last days or end times. Not a single reference to Nephilim ever. So it seems to me that the last of the Nephilim died in the flood. And it was when they were backed into a corner that these absolutely unreliable people were fear-mongering as a scare tactic, and they told a don't go in the woods type of tall tale. And so that is why they made 4 claims about which the whole entire rest of the Bible knows absolutely nothing. And since those 4 claims come out of absolutely unreliable people that nobody should believe, then we must conclude that the last of the Nephilim died in the flood. They did not return, and they never will in any way, shape, or form. And that's my opening. Thank you very much.
Okay. Wow, that's it's quite succinct, but it's a lot to unpack. But I trust TJ is up to the task, aren't you, TJ?
Well, this is something I've been looking at for a while. I'm familiar with Ken's argument. I did read your book, Ken, Nephilim According to Pop Researchers. I can't remember the exact title, but it was a good book. I do have some things I'd like to say about that. So the first thing I want to bring out from my understanding of this text is that while it does appear to be a report told in two parts, I don't think that it's a description of two separate reports. My view of this is that the spies have come, they've spoken to Moses and Aaron, and it would seem to me that the appropriate thing to do in this situation, they're approaching the authority figures, they're approaching the people who are in charge of the nation. It would be the leadership of the spy group that would speak to Moses and Aaron first. So we're getting the good report coming first, and that makes sense to me to have come from Joshua and Caleb rather than the other members of the spy party. So they've come and talked about the positive aspects of their expedition. They've talked about all the good stuff that they saw. And they've also given a bit of an outline of the problems they saw. They've mentioned the Anakim, and I'm going to suggest that the Anakim were well known to Israel prior to this. And that's what's got people all stirred up and makes Caleb feel compelled to still the crowd and quiet them down a bit, because they're starting to get discouraged already. Then we have the following report, which again sounds to me like it's coming from the rest of the group, and they're
TJ, let me just get you to hold on, because we're coming up against a break here, and I want you to be able to carry that thought out in full before we have to interrupt. I don't want to interrupt you as you're making that statement there. If you just tuned in, we're talking with Ken Ammi and TJ Steadman. They are taking sort of two different sides of the Nephilim issue. And if you missed Ken's opening comments, then I would recommend that you listen to the show when it rebroadcasts or when we post it to YouTube. But we will be right back with Ken Ammi and TJ Steadman and the Nephilim debate.
You're listening to Expedition Truth with Jack Ashcraft.
It's just good, clean fun.
Intelligent talk for the discerning mind. Share your thoughts of the show by calling 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Find us worldwide on Skype at KCOR Radio, or jump into our live chat room at www.kcorradio.com.
Now the world will begin hearing us.
More truth than humanly possible after these brief words from our sponsors.
They say that the truth is stranger than fiction. What if they are one and the same?
It's a life form, unlike anything we know, not cellular but electrical in nature, extremely intelligent.
Join Dave Emmons, host of The Strange Truth, every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, as he connects the dots that others miss. The Strange Truth is a groundbreaking 2-hour talk show that interviews the hottest UFO experts, experiencers, whistleblowers, and spiritual masters from around the world.
A tool for people to connect with the universe and begin to understand it.
The Strange Truth.
It digs deep into current events, the extraterrestrial contact phenomenon, explores suppressed history, and dissects false flag conspiracy, all while expanding your spiritual ascendance. ascendance.
What was that name again?
The Strange Truth, hosted by Dave Emmons, live every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Come get tomorrow's news today.
The KCOR Digital Radio Network family this Christmas would like to join you and your family as we celebrate home for the holidays.
I'm psyched. I know it's awesome.
Starting Christmas Eve at 9 p.m. Pacific, the network goes commercial-free, playing the best in Christmas music from around the world.
No one should be alone on Christmas.
Christmas Day, turn us on and leave us on.
You're going to love it. You're going to love it.
From the entire KCOR Digital Radio Network family, Merry Christmas.
Ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas. Ho, 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 ho. You love them enough to do anything for them.
Mom, I need to be wiped.
Coming!
Including checking nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
They say that the truth is stranger than fiction. What if they are one and the same?
It's a life form, unlike anything we know, not cellular but electrical in nature, extremely intelligent.
Join Dave Emmons, host of The Strange Truth, every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, as he connects the dots that others miss. The Strange Truth is a groundbreaking 2-hour talk show that interviews the hottest UFO experts, experiencers, whistleblowers, and spiritual masters from around the world.
A tool for people to connect with the universe and begin to understand it.
The Strange Truth.
It digs deep into current events, the extraterrestrial contact phenomenon, explores suppressed history, and dissects false flag conspiracy, all while expanding your spiritual ascendance.
What was that name again?
The Strange Truth, hosted by Dave Emmons, live every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Come get tomorrow's news today.
Welcome back to Expedition Truth. Expedition Truth.
This place is incredible.
Intelligent talk for the discerning mind. To be on the show live, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
What are you waiting for?
Worldwide callers, use Skype name KCOR Radio. Share your thoughts of the show on Twitter at KCOR Radio using hashtag KCOR. Even better, join like-minded individuals in our live chat room at KCORradio.com. Now, back to Expedition Truth with Jack Ashcraft, where the truth never fears questions.
All right, welcome back to the show. I want to jump right back into this, TJ. I want to let you go ahead and continue your response to Ken's opening comments.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so picking up in Numbers 13, verse 30, then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "We should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong for us." So that shows there the transition from the leadership of the group having control of the narrative to the rest of the spy party sort of taking over, and they're now interjecting with their 2 cents. And they certainly don't have the positive view that Joshua and Caleb expressed. It's also interesting to me that of the whole spy party, you've got these 2 individuals who are faithful, and they're actually not of Israelite heritage, as far as I can tell. We have Caleb, who is called a Kenizzite in Joshua, and Joshua the son of Nun. Now that's Joshua's actually not his original name. Moses gave him that name, but his father's name, Nun, that's an Egyptian name. So we've got these 2 guys who have some experience or some culture outside of the common experience of the Israelite at this point. And these are the two guys who have a positive outlook on this whole thing. So it seems interesting to me that there's a bit of a contrast there between the background and culture of the spies and what they have to say. So that, I think, speaks volumes about how we're to understand this bad report. Now, I know for a lot of people, particularly if you've got like a King James or something, it'll say evil report. And we're inclined to think that this is some sort of intentionally wicked deception or a lie or something that we have to treat as an out-and-out falsehood. Although usage of the term behind the phrase, Ken will have to correct me on the pronunciation, but I read it as debar for the bad report. That term never comes up in the context of telling a lie or a falsehood. It's more a case of bad news. So if I come up to you and say, I've got some bad news for you, your cat just died, that's sort of the sense that we get from that word. It's a discouraging word rather than an attempt at deliberate deception necessarily. I'm not saying that there was no attempt to mislead the people, but we can't treat what they say as an abject falsehood. We've got to consider that they're not happy about what they've seen and they're really trying to drive that point home. Now, with regard to the Anakim, we have a proclivity, I suppose, to read these lists of names and people groups like they're all ethnicities. I don't think that all these groups necessarily belong to a particular nationality or tribal group. And when it comes to the Anakim, they seem to be used as a generalization for the rest of the group. So you have all these different tribes mentioned. The Anakim appear to be a larger group under which these smaller groups sort of find their place. Also, historically speaking, we've got a bit of context on the Anakim from outside of the scriptures. It would appear that they are considered more like a ruling class. So we've got an elite that have some control over these regions. So it's not surprising to find that the Anakim get the center of attention here. And according to Greek records, we have Anakim recorded as being of some significant size. I think it's Pausanias claims 10 cubits for one that was found buried. But that's coming from the 2nd century AD. Now, as far as the strength versus size issue, I don't think it's necessarily wise to separate the two. If people are big, they're going to be strong. If they're strong, it doesn't mean they can't be big. So I think when we consider this as a high context audience, and we're talking about people who are there experiencing the things and they've got background knowledge of the people groups and stuff like that already. The Anakim are actually known in Egypt. We have archaeological evidence of that from the execration texts, which do predate the Exodus. So there's reasonable grounds to suggest that Israel had at least heard of the Anakim prior to their journey into the wilderness, which would suggest that they knew what they were in for when it's been brought up by the spies here. So that to me tells me why the people were in an uproar as soon as the Anakim were mentioned. Now, we could go on about the Anakim, but I think we're probably going to get into that later. I do want to mention this idea of the Nephilim not being mentioned outside of these two texts, as Ken pointed out, which is a correct assertion. My view on that, and the reason that we don't see that term exactly, Nephilim, coming up elsewhere, is because if we are to understand Nephilim as being a word that refers to giants, then that's coming from Aramaic, so we're at a later point in history. These things are written into the text long after these events took place. So we're talking exilic, post-exilic period. So I'm not surprised that we don't find the scriptures littered with these references. If we have a late redactor or compiler of scripture popping it in once or twice to give a little context and make those connections, I think that is fair enough. I don't think they need to go through and revise the entire Torah to make sure that we're getting it. So that's the Nephilim. Now, if we get back to the flood, the idea that God would be seen to have failed if the Nephilim should appear again after the flood. Now, I find that interesting because we don't have in Scripture any account of the purpose of the flood being for eliminating the Nephilim. The Scripture says that that God brought the flood to destroy all flesh, and yet we still have people and animals afterwards, so we've got to take that as a generalization, and there may be specific exceptions. I am aware, of course, that in the New Testament we're advised that only the 8 people on board the ark survived, and I agree with that. But I don't think that we're necessarily doing justice to the text to take the statements that are clearly generalizations in the Genesis account too literally.
Okay.
Now, my own view.
We have hold on, TJ, because we've both gone 15 minutes each there. I want to give you both a chance to discuss this openly with each other. And so, whatever it is your next point is going to be, you can more than likely you're going to address it during this conversation with Ken. Ken, do you have any questions off the top of your head right now for TJ?
Well, if Mr. Steadman wanted to finish a point there, then let's let him, and then we'll kind of take it from there, if that's okay.
Sure, that's fine. Okay.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that, Ken. Really, I just wanted to share my own view on how it is that the author of Numbers, or perhaps the redactor, as it might seem, is able to make this connection with Nephilim after the flood. And to me, we're talking now about the idea of some sort of continuation after the flood or through the flood, however you want to describe that. The author of Numbers sees some connection, and we've got to work out how he's able to make that statement. I mean, if we're going to take this, and it would appear to be I think in your work, Ken, you've called this inclusion a gloss in verse 33. The sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim. Now, that's an interesting one, part of the Nephilim. In my reading of it, and I think the King James shows this one pretty accurately. You've got the Nephilim come out of the Anakim. And I think that's an important one. The King James tells us that the sons of Anak come out of the giants. And
wait,
my understanding.
Okay, sorry. What you just read and the way that you related it are contradictory.
I'm looking at two different versions here, but the sense that
hold on just a sec. Hold on just a sec. Ken, explain how. How is it contradictory?
Well, if you read out of the King James Version again, would you please?
Yeah, okay. So the King James says, and then we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers.
Okay, I thought you read a version. I thought you read a version that had the Nephilim coming out of the Anakim. Was that the other version?
I've got that in my notes somewhere. The understanding that I had from this is that there's a derivation here where the Anakim have some connection to the giants, but it's not a biological connection. Yeah, okay, so if you want to say Nephilim, that's fine. There's no biological connection necessarily implied by the language there, as far as I can tell. And that to me is the main point, because I don't think that we're talking about a biological connection at all. So in my view, these Anakim, they don't have a genealogy that traces them back to before the flood. They have a spiritual connection. So if we're looking at the cultures of the ancient Near East, they all like to claim that they've got this wisdom from before the flood. You know, you look at the Mesopotamians, and they've got the Abkalu and that kind of thing. They want to make these connections and say, well, you know, we've got the ancient wisdom from before the flood. We've got the gifts of civilization that were handed down by the gods in the antediluvian period. And I think that's the kind of connection that we're seeing here. So,
okay, if I may, because by my clock we have about 10 minutes before we wrap up the show, and we are not even really into Q&A yet, or open discussion. So, I mean, I would wonder, why is it that you are focusing on Anakim? Because the report certainly didn't.
Well, the Anakim mentions features quite a bit.
Well, okay, they list having seen Anakim, Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Canaanites, and then there's the issue of the Caleb having to quiet the people. So you can't pick the Anakim out of that at that point. Why not go with Jebusites or Amorites or any of the other groups?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I believe that the Anakim are actually an umbrella group, okay, and these smaller groups are part of it, which is why in verse 28 we have, moreover, we saw the children of Anak there, and then we get a breakdown of that large group, and we're told Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, etc. So we've started with a broad brush, and now it's getting specific.
Okay, I mean, we know, for example, Philistines were a subgroup of Anakim, but so okay, you're just reading all those as subgroups.
Yeah, that's how I see it, because I don't think that it's an ethnic term. When we're talking about Anakim, I believe that we're talking about a group that is defined by a religious system.
Well, I mean, they're named after a man named Anak. So I guess you would
Yeah,
have to think that for some time it was a genealogy, the Anakim, those people who are physically related to Anak. And then, I mean, going beyond that, okay, I don't really mind speculation as long as we're close to the text, but the common sense reading is Anakim are bloodlines to Anak.
Yeah, well, I understand that as long as we're reading that sons of in terms of a genealogical descent. Sorry. The other way to read it is that we're talking about a class of people, and in that instance, then sons of Anak really are going to be people of a similar status or similar position, or who are members of a particular group. Okay, so. In the Israelite community, you had circumcision. If you get circumcised, you're part of the group. You're part of, the Son of God. If we're talking about Israel as the Son of God, right? So,
I mean, I see what you're saying, because anybody who would marry into the Anakim would be considered of the Anakim, just like anyone who converts to Judaism would be called a Jew, whether they're genetically Jewish or theologically Jewish. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
My understanding of the Anakim as well, as much as we have a man who's named Anak, I don't think that we need to necessarily limit our view to this physical man. I mean, so much is made of people.
Okay, I hate to interrupt you, but in almost every point you're making, you're saying, I know what the text says, but I'm going to take a view that is not something that you could readily read into the text. It's something that ends up being quite different. So they're called Anakim because they began with a man named Anak, but then you want to set that aside, and I'm not sure why. I don't want to put words in your mouth. It just seems that way. Like you're constantly affirming what the text says and saying, but I view it, and then you end up saying something that's quite different.
Well, it's just that I put a lot of study into the
I have too.
The cultural context. And so, when I see sons of Anak, I'm aware that the readers of Scripture are already familiar with these stories. They've had oral tradition passed down for generations. They're not reading this for the first time going, well, we don't know what this is until somebody explains it. And the culture behind all this reveals that the Anakim were well known in Egypt, well known in Greece. They were considered to be divine or semi-divine in most contexts. As far as the Greeks concerned, we have attestations of great size. We don't get that from Egypt, but these people are known as divinized rulers, people who have a connection to the supernatural, and I think that's where the Nephilim connection comes in, because they're claiming a connection to those spirits as part of their ancestry.
But who is they? You said they're claiming. Who is claiming?
Those are the claims that we find in the Greek text and what we know of the culture of these people externally.
Okay. But internally, we only get that from unfaithful, disloyal, self-contradictory, embellishing spies who were rebuked for what they said. And when the scripture touches upon literature from other culture, it's usually done in order to set it straight, not to incorporate it into its theology. So again, going back to a point I made earlier and touching upon something you said, I'm not claiming that the bad report was false because it's called what we term bad. I'm claiming it's false because of the contents of the report, because of the things they said, and because of the 4 points they made about which the whole entire rest of the Bible knows absolutely nothing. So we must take it seriously that these 4 main points that make up the very premise for what ends up being theory of post-flood Nephilim it's based on this one single verse, the whole entire theory. And it just so happens, tongue-in-cheek, to come from absolutely unreliable people. I mean, who would believe people like this? I don't understand why there's this sort of need to argue in favor of post-flood Nephilim, premised upon people who show themselves to be absolutely unreliable. I mean, which one of us would believe people like this in our daily lives if we met people like this? And then we based considerable amounts of effort and our theory upon what they said.
Yeah, well, firstly, I think what I'm really saying here is not that I'm arguing that there are Nephilim after the flood.
Wait, guys, we have about 1 minute. We have about 1 minute.
Sure. The claim is made that they saw the Nephilim.
And let me just, I hate to interrupt because we have a minute, just to make a point. Keep in mind, the Israelites didn't see any of this. It is exclusively the claim of these unreliable people that they saw Nephilim. So go ahead, please.
All right, I'm going to have to break in here, gentlemen.
We're just barely getting started, aren't we?
Just starting to get
Steadman.
just starting to get your teeth into it, I know.
Barely.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Gentlemen, I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your knowledge. You're both very knowledgeable. And I hope I can have you both back on at a later time. From us here at Expedition Truth, that's the end of tonight's expedition. We ask you to pray for us, pray for our guests, and God bless. Good night.
You've been listening to Expedition Truth, hosted by Jack Ashcraft. It's time to believe in the unbelievable. Live every Thursday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Jack Ashcraft, the show, as well as his guests, please visit his website at www.paleoorthodoxy.com. Expedition Truth. Intelligent talk for the discerning mind. Why? Because the truth never fears questions.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.